The winter wind cut through Cedar Falls like a broken promise, and Margaret O'Sullivan stood on that train platform with nothing but a carpet bag and a lie. She'd sent Harrison Caldwell a photograph, but not her own. Her dead sister's face smiled from that picture, young and slender as a willow branch. Now, at 32, Maggie's curves filled her traveling dress in ways that made men stare and women whisper. She knew what she'd done. She'd known it the moment she sealed that envelope in Chicago. But a woman with nowhere to go makes desperate choices. Harrison took one look at her stepping off that train, his banker's eyes calculating like he was weighing gold dust. "You're not the woman in the photograph." The words hung in the frozen air between them. Every person on that platform turned to stare. Maggie felt the weight of their judgment, the heat of their curiosity burning through her wool coat. What happens when a woman's last hope crumbles to dust? What price must she pay for one desperate lie? Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from today? This is fraud, pure and simple. Harrison's voice carried across the hotel lobby like a judge's gavel. Mail-order brides are expected to be truthful about their assets. Maggie's cheeks burned, but her spine stayed straight. She'd faced worse than a pompous banker's disappointment. The contract states a willing bride of good character. Nothing about appearance. Good character? Harrison laughed, cruel and sharp. A woman who deceives about something so basic has questionable character indeed. That's when she saw him, the blacksmith watching from the corner, his dark eyes taking in every word. William Brennan stood 6 feet of weathered strength, his left hand missing 2 fingers, his jaw set like granite. Most men would have looked away from such a public humiliation. This one stepped forward. "Problem here, Caldwell." Harrison straightened his vest. "Private matter, Brennan. The lady and I are discussing a broken contract. Seems to me the lady deserves better than being dressed down in public." Maggie felt something stir in her chest. Not gratitude, but recognition. This man's voice held the kind of quiet authority that didn't need volume. When he offered her his arm, she took it without hesitation. His touch sent electricity through her glove. She'd forgotten what it felt like. A man's strength offered, not demanded. "Thank you," she whispered. "William Brennan," he said simply. "And you're not the first person in Cedar Falls to start over." Outside the hotel, snow fell like secrets. Maggie pulled her shawl tighter, suddenly aware of how far she was from everything familiar. "I suppose I should find somewhere to stay while I arrange passage back to Chicago." Chicago? Will's breath made clouds in the cold air. "Seems a shame to travel all this way just to turn around." "I hardly have a choice." Harrison made it clear I'm not suitable. Something flickered in Will's eyes. Harrison Caldwell wouldn't know suitable if it bit him on his banker's backside. Despite everything, Maggie smiled. When had a man last made her smile? "There's a teaching position open," Will continued. "The miners' children need schooling. Pays fair, and Mrs. Henderson runs a respectable boarding house." Maggie studied his face. "Why would you help a stranger?" "Maybe because I know what it's like to start over." His scarred hand touched his chest briefly. "War teaches a man about second chances." The way he said it, low and careful, told her there were stories there. Dark ones, maybe, but honest. She'd had enough of pretty lies. "I'd need to prove myself worthy of the position." "You stood up to Harrison Caldwell in front of half the town." "I'd say that's proof enough of backbone." A gust of wind swirled snow around them, and Maggie shivered. Without thinking, Will stepped closer, his body blocking the worst of it. She caught his scent. Wood smoke and metal, clean sweat and something indefinably male. Her late husband had smelled of stale cologne and disappointment. This was different. This was... "I should show you the schoolhouse," Will said, his voice rougher now. "If you're interested." Maggie nodded, not trusting her voice. As they walked through the snowy streets, she became acutely aware of his presence beside her. The way he shortened his stride to match hers, how he positioned himself between her and the wind. Small kindnesses, but they felt monumental after years of neglect. The schoolhouse sat at the edge of town, modest but sturdy. Will produced a key and ushered her inside. The single room held rough-hewn desks and a pot-bellied stove that he quickly coaxed to life. "Children come when they can," he explained, feeding wood to the flames. "Mining families need every hand they can get, but they want better for their young ones." Maggie ran her fingers over the simple blackboard. She'd taught Sunday school back in Chicago, before Robert decided it wasn't fitting for his wife, before she'd learned to make herself smaller, quieter, less. "The last teacher?" she asked. "Married a rancher up north. Left sudden-like." Will straightened from the stove, and firelight painted his features in golden shadow. For a moment, neither spoke. The only sounds were crackling wood and wind against the windows. "Why are you really doing this?" Maggie asked softly. His dark eyes met hers. "Maybe because I know what it's like to be judged for your scars." The honesty in his voice made her chest tight. When had anyone looked at her, really looked, without finding her wanting? "I have more than scars, Mr. Brennan." "So do I, Mrs. O'Sullivan. So do most folks worth knowing." Outside, the storm was picking up. But inside that little schoolhouse, with firelight dancing between them, Maggie felt something she hadn't in years. Hope. 3 weeks into teaching, Maggie discovered that hope could be dangerous. She'd settled into a routine. Morning lessons with the miners' children, afternoon hours preparing materials, evenings at Mrs. Henderson's boarding house, trying not to think about the blacksmith who'd given her this chance. But Will Brennan had a way of appearing when she least expected it. "Afternoon, Mrs. O'Sullivan." His voice made her look up from the arithmetic problems she was grading. He stood in the doorway, snow-dusting his dark coat, carrying a bucket of coal. "The stove shouldn't need. Gets cold up here when the sun goes down." He moved past her to feed the fire, and she caught that scent again. Her pulse quickened despite herself. "That's very thoughtful. Practical." But his eyes lingered on her face. Can't have the teacher freezing. They'd fallen into this careful dance, him finding reasons to check on the school, her finding reasons to need his help. Always proper, always with Mrs. Henderson, or one of the children as unofficial chaperones. But the tension was building like steam in a kettle. "Will," she said softly, using his given name for the first time. "You don't have to." "I know." He straightened, coal dust on his hands. "But I want to." The honesty stopped her breath. When had anyone simply wanted to care for her? That evening brought unwelcome news. Harrison Caldwell appeared at Mrs. Henderson's door, hat in hand and contrition on his tongue. "Margaret, I may have been hasty in my judgment." Mrs. Henderson served tea with disapproving efficiency, while Harrison laid out his case. The town needed a first lady for his mayoral campaign, a woman of substance and character. "You've proven yourself here," he continued. "Perhaps we could start fresh." Maggie's tea grew cold in her hands. "Start fresh? A proper courtship?" "I was wrong to judge based on superficial concerns." But his eyes still catalogued her figure like a merchant pricing goods. She saw calculation there, not desire. Certainly not the kind of heat she'd glimpsed in Will Brennan's dark gaze. "I need time to consider." Harrison smiled, confident now. Of course. But don't wait too long. A woman needs security, especially in a place like this. After he left, Mrs. Henderson snorted. Security's one thing. Being treated like livestock is another. That night, Maggie walked to the schoolhouse despite the cold. She needed space to think away from Mrs. Henderson's knowing looks and Harrison's presumption. She found Will there, adjusting the stove's damper. Couldn't sleep either, he asked quietly. Harrison came calling. Will's hand stilled on the metal. I heard. He wants to start over. A proper courtship. And what do you want, Maggie? The way he said her name, like it mattered, like she mattered, made her throat tight. I want... She turned to face him fully. I want to feel alive again. The words hung between them, more honest than she'd intended. Will stood slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. Maggie. I know it's not proper. I know you're just being kind. He crossed to her in 2 strides, his scarred hand cupping her face. Kind? The roughness of his palm against her skin sent fire through her veins. She'd forgotten what it felt like to be touched with reverence instead of duty. There's nothing kind about what I want to do to you, he whispered. Her breath caught. Will, tell me to stop. Instead, she rose on her toes and kissed him. His mouth was warm, demanding. Nothing like her late husband's perfunctory pecks. Will kissed like a man who'd been starving, and she was the first feast he'd seen in years. His good hand tangled in her hair, while his damaged one traced her spine through her dress. She pressed closer, reveling in his strength, his heat, the way he made small sounds of pleasure against her lips. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she saw desire burning in his eyes. Raw, honest want. For her. All of her. This is madness, she whispered. Best kind there is. But footsteps outside made them spring apart. Harrison's voice carried through the door. Margaret. I saw light. Will stepped into the shadows while Maggie smoothed her hair with trembling hands. By the time Harrison entered, she was seated at her desk, grading papers by lamplight. Working late? Harrison's eyes swept the room suspiciously. The children need these returned tomorrow. He moved closer, and she caught the scent of bay rum and ambition. Nothing like the honest masculinity she'd just been drowning in. You shouldn't be here alone after dark. It's not safe. I'm perfectly fine. Harrison's hand settled on her shoulder, possessive. A woman like you needs protection, Margaret, especially with men like Brennan sniffing around. The crude words made her skin crawl, but she kept her voice level. Mr. Brennan has been nothing but respectful. Has he? Harrison's grip tightened. I wonder. From the shadows, she felt Will's tension like heat from a forge. The next morning brought more than sunshine to Cedar Falls. It brought scandal. Someone had seen Will leaving the schoolhouse the night before. By noon, whispers followed Maggie down Main Street like hungry dogs. The respectable wives gathered in clusters, their voices carrying just loud enough for her to hear. Shameless, really. Poor Mr. Caldwell. What can you expect from a Chicago woman? Maggie held her head high and continued to the mercantile. But each word struck like a physical blow. She'd worked so hard to build respectability here. Now it crumbled around her ears because of one stolen kiss. At the store, she found Will loading supplies into his wagon. Their eyes met across the crowded space, and heat flashed between them, despite everything. Mrs. O'Sullivan. His voice carried careful formality, but she saw the muscle jumping in his jaw. Mr. Brennan other customers watched their exchange with vulture-like interest. Maggie selected her few purchases quickly, desperate to escape the stifling attention. Outside, Will caught her arm gently. Maggie, about last night was a mistake. The words tasted like ashes. His eyes darkened. Don't let them make you ashamed of what we felt. What we felt doesn't matter if it destroys everything I've built here. And what have you built? A life walking on eggshells? Settling for Harrison Caldwell's table scraps? The harsh words stung because they held truth. At least I'd have security. You'd have a cage. Will stepped closer, lowering his voice. I've seen caged animals, Maggie. They forget how to live free. That afternoon, Harrison arrived at the schoolhouse with flowers and an ultimatum disguised as a proposal. The talk in town is unfortunate, he said, setting the bouquet on her desk. But marriage to me would end it immediately. Maggie stared at the expensive hothouse roses. Beautiful, perfect, and completely without fragrance, like the man offering them. You're very kind, but I'm not being kind. His tone sharpened. I'm being practical. Your reputation is damaged. I'm offering to repair it. And what would you expect in return? Harrison's smile turned predatory. What any husband expects from his wife. Obedience, discretion, and his eyes raked over her body, fulfillment of conjugal duties. The clinical words made her skin crawl. I need time. Time is a luxury you can't afford. He moved behind her chair, his hands settling on her shoulders. The school board meets next week. Without my support, you'll lose this position. His grip tightened when she tried to pull away. Harrison, please. You'll learn to please, Margaret. I can be very patient with proper motivation. The door slammed open so hard it rattled the windows. Will Brennan filled the frame like an avenging angel, his dark eyes fixed on Harrison's hands. Take your hands off her. Harrison's grip loosened but didn't release. This is a private conversation, Brennan. Not anymore. Will stepped into the room, every inch of him radiating controlled violence. Maggie, is this what you want? She looked between them, Harrison's cold calculation and Will's burning intensity. One offered security wrapped in silk chains. The other offered nothing but honesty and the kind of passion that could consume her completely. No, she whispered. Then stronger. No, it's not. Harrison's face darkened. You're making a serious mistake, Margaret. I won't offer again. Good. The word slipped out before she could stop it, and Harrison's eyes went flat with rage. You'll regret this. Both of you. After he left, silence filled the schoolhouse like smoke. Maggie slumped in her chair, suddenly exhausted. I've just destroyed my life, she said quietly. Will knelt beside her chair, his scarred hand covering hers. No, you just saved it. How can you be sure? Because I know what it looks like when someone's dying inside. I've been there. She turned her hand palm up, threading their fingers together. His skin was rough from years of honest work, marked by old burns and fresh cuts. Real hands. Honest hands. What happens now? Now you choose. His thumb traced across her knuckles. Stay and fight for what we could have. Or let fear drive you back to Chicago. I don't even know what we could have. Will's eyes searched her face. Then let me show you. He pulled her to her feet, and suddenly the careful distance they'd maintained collapsed. His mouth found hers with desperate hunger, and she responded with equal fervor. This wasn't the tentative exploration of the night before. This was claiming, pure and simple. His hands roamed her body with reverent appreciation, tracing the curves Harrison had seen as flaws. Under Will's touch, she felt powerful instead of shameful, desired instead of tolerated. Beautiful, he murmured against her throat. So damn beautiful. When his lips found the sensitive spot below her ear, she gasped and arched against him. She'd never known her body could respond like this, could crave with such intensity. Will, I know, sweetheart. I know. But the sound of approaching voices forced them apart, both breathing hard. Will's hair was mussed where her fingers had tangled in it, and she knew she must look thoroughly compromised. What are we doing? She whispered. Living, he said simply. Finally, living. Outside, Cedar Falls gossiped and judged. Harrison Caldwell plotted his revenge, but inside that little schoolhouse, 2 wounded souls had found something worth fighting for. Harrison Caldwell had never been a man to accept defeat gracefully. Within a week, Maggie's world began unraveling with surgical precision. The school board suddenly questioned her moral fitness to teach. Mrs. Henderson received complaints about her boarding house harboring women of questionable virtue. Even the mercantile owner suggested she might be more comfortable shopping elsewhere. The message was clear: conform or be cast out. Maggie sat in the empty schoolhouse, Harrison's ultimatum letter crumpled in her fist. Marry him by month's end, or face complete social exile. She'd seen this tactic before in Chicago: the slow, methodical destruction of anyone who dared challenge the established order. Will found her there as snow began falling outside. Bad news? He nodded toward the letter. The worst kind. He's cutting off all my means of survival. Will read the letter, his jaw tightening with each line. Bastard. He's within his rights. Technically. Rights? Will crumpled the paper further. A man has no right to corner a woman like a trapped animal. Then what do you suggest? I can't eat principles, Will. I can't pay rent with righteous indignation. He was quiet for so long, she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of a man making a life-changing decision. Marry me. The words hung in the air between them like a challenge. Maggie's heart lurched, but her practical mind recoiled. Will, not for convenience, not for protection. He moved to stand before her, his dark eyes fierce with intention. Marry me because what we have is real. Because you make me feel alive in ways I thought were dead and buried. She stood on shaking legs. You barely know me. I know you're brave enough to travel 1,000 miles on nothing but hope. I know you face down bullies without flinching. I know the way you taste like salvation and feel like coming home. His hands framed her face with devastating tenderness. I know I've been half alive since the war, and you make me whole. Tears blurred her vision. I'm not the woman in that photograph, Will. I'm not young or slender, or you're the woman who makes my heart race when she walks into a room. You're the woman whose laugh could bring dead men back to life. His thumbs brushed away her tears. You're the woman I dream about every night and wake up wanting more. The raw honesty in his voice broke something open in her chest. What if we're wrong? What if this is just desperation? Then we'll be wrong together. Before she could respond, the schoolhouse door crashed open. Harrison stood in the entrance, fury radiating from every line of his body. Touching scene, he said, ice in his voice, but pointless. Will moved protectively in front of Maggie. This doesn't concern you, Caldwell. Doesn't it? Harrison pulled papers from his coat. Brennan, you're hereby evicted from your shop. The bank is calling in your loan, effective immediately. Maggie's blood turned cold. You can't. I own the bank, my dear. I can do whatever serves the community's best interests. Harrison's smile was razor sharp. And removing undesirable influences definitely serves our interests. Will's hands clenched into fists. You son of a bitch. Careful, Brennan. Threatening a bank president could land you in jail. The trap was perfect. Harrison could destroy them both financially while maintaining his respectable facade. Unless... There might be another solution, a new voice said from the doorway. Sheriff Tom McKenna stepped inside, snow-dusting his badge. Behind him came 3 minors Maggie recognized, parents of her students. Tom, Harrison's voice carried warning. This is a private matter. Funny thing about private matters in a small town, the sheriff said mildly. They have a way of becoming public real quick. One of the miners, a weathered man named Pete Kowalski, stepped forward. Been hearing interesting stories, Mr. Caldwell, about money going missing from worker accounts. Harrison's face went white. That's slander. Is it? McKenna pulled out a ledger. Mrs. O'Sullivan here brought this to my attention. Seems she knows a thing or two about bookkeeping. Maggie's heart pounded as the pieces clicked together. She noticed discrepancies in the figures she'd seen, small amounts skimmed from multiple accounts, individually insignificant, but collectively. You've been stealing from the miners to cover your failed investments, she said quietly. Harrison's mask finally slipped, revealing the cornered animal beneath. You meddling bitch. Will moved fast, but Pete Kowalski was faster. The miner's fist connected with Harrison's jaw with a sound like breaking kindling. That's for stealing my boy's school money, Pete growled. As Harrison crumpled, McKenna shook his head sadly. Harrison Caldwell, you're under arrest for embezzlement and fraud. In the sudden quiet that followed, Maggie found herself in Will's arms, both of them shaking with relief and residual fear. Is it over? She whispered. The scary part. His lips brushed her temple. Now comes the good part. Spring came to Cedar Falls like a benediction. Maggie stood in the doorway of Will's cabin, their cabin now, watching him work in the garden they'd planted together. 6 months married, and she still felt her heart skip when he looked up and smiled. The common law ceremony had been simple. Judge McKenna officiating, the whole town watching as 2 damaged souls chose to heal together. No white dress, no church bells, just honest vows, spoken under an endless sky. Harrison Caldwell sat in territorial prison, his political ambitions as dead as last year's snow. The bank had been restructured under federal oversight, the stolen money returned to its rightful owners. Maggie's hand drifted to her still flat stomach, where new life was beginning. Another chance, another beginning. She'd tell Will tonight when the work was done, and they lay together in the darkness, her head on his chest, his scarred hands gentle on her skin. You're thinking loud again, Will said, straightening from the vegetable rows. Dirt streaked his forearms, sweat dampened his shirt, and she loved him so much it physically ached. Good thoughts or dangerous ones? Both, she admitted. He crossed to her with that loose-limbed stride that still made her pulse quicken. When he reached her, she went into his arms like coming home. I love you, Margaret Brennan, he said against her hair. Even when I'm thinking dangerous thoughts. Especially then. They stood together in the doorway, watching the sun paint the mountains gold. Behind them lay a house filled with furniture they'd chosen together, books they shared, a bed where passion and tenderness lived in equal measure. Ahead stretched years of seasons, of challenges weathered hand in hand, of love deepened by choice rather than convenience. The frontier had tested them both, stripped away pretense and social expectations to reveal the truth underneath. They were imperfect people who'd found perfect love in an imperfect world. And that, Maggie thought, as Will's arms tightened around her, was the most beautiful thing of all. What did you think of Margaret and Will's story? Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. And if you enjoyed this tale of love conquering all, subscribe for more stories that prove second chances can be sweeter than first ones.